labor market, where you're getting your labor from, and just basically all of the business pieces of getting into a brand new first-gen farm. So your legislators from the 42nd District are Alicia Rule, Joe Timmons, and newly elected Sharon Shoemake, who will replace the former Senator Doug Erickson that passed away in the 42nd District. So I would highly encourage anybody here to reach out to those three who represent the 42nd Legislative District. And I would also recommend that you talk to everybody from the 40th Legislative District as well, which would be Deborah Lakanoff, Alex Rammel, and Senator Liz Lovelett. Those are going to be the 6 most important names that you can talk to about your experience as a farmer, as maybe an industry support player. You need to get those 6 people on speed dial and start calling them and talking to them and letting them know that if they have an agricultural question, that they call you directly and they don't call somebody else. We are going to have a very large part of the job is going to be educating these 30 new members to the legislature. So let me ask, after giving that pitch, how many people in this room right now have met with one of those 6 names that I just mentioned for legislators? Okay, 3 people. Okay, so I think the homework assignment is to go and get on Google and type in 40th or 42nd Legislative District legislators, look up their numbers. It's the first thing that pops up when you Google those names, and put a phone call into their offices. Introduce yourself to the staffer, let them know what you do for a living and how long you've been doing it, and give them your cell phone number and let them know that if they have a question about agriculture, that they call you so that you can give them a firsthand account of what it's like to be in the agricultural industry in Whatcom and Skagit County. Getting into sort of the meat of the presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the regulations that were passed, some of the policy that was passed in 2022 session, which was a 60-day short legislative session. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we see coming in the pipeline for the long session, which starts January 9th, 2023, which will be a 105-day session. And I wouldn't doubt if it goes into overtime. They have until July 1st to implement a new 2-year budget for the state that would be from 2023 until July 1st, 2023 until July 1st, 2025. So basically in 2022, we saw several regulations that directly impact farmers here in the state. The biggest one being the agricultural overtime issue. All of you are familiar with that by now. It basically set 3 tiers of where of hours worked. The second tier is going to kick in this year, takes it down to 48 hours. If anybody works over 48 hours, you have to pay them overtime. And so that's been a major impact to every grower, every farmer in the state. 2 years from now, it'll go down to anything over 40 hours. So that's, as we're all aware, we're all working more than 40 hours on farms. I should have also said that I'm a 4th generation tree fruit farmer. I grew up in Prosser. We still farm in Prosser and in the Wapato area. So a lot of what I'll discuss today is also a personal impact to my family as well. So it's in my blood, and obviously I have a personal connection to a lot of this that takes place in Olympia. Looking at the 2-year budget that's coming up, the state currently spends $61 billion over 2 years to keep everything functioning in the state. That includes obviously public schools and transportation funding and everything like that. We're expecting in the next 2-year budget, it'll most likely be close to $66 billion for 23 to 25. That's a big number for a state In terms of Oregon, that's about almost 2 times as big as their state budget, and it dwarfs Idaho, what they spend in Idaho to run that state. The other piece to that is a transportation package. They passed a transportation package in the 2022 session. It was about a $17 billion deal over 16 years. One of the biggest pieces for agriculture in that package was money for the Blue City Shortline Railroad over in Eastern Washington. The reason I mention that is that Shortline Railroad in Eastern Washington moves a large amount of the product, crop protection product that ends up over here. It comes in, goes onto the Shortline Railroad. Sometimes it goes towards Portland, then it comes up I-5. And so $155 million, about $158 million actually to be exact, went into maintenance for that Shortline Railroad. The other large piece of funding in the transportation package from 2022 was $1.5 billion to replace the Columbia River bridge to Portland, between Vancouver, Washington, and Portland. Obviously, any sort of funding along I-5, we keep a pretty close eye on. That $1.5 billion would be matched by $1.5 billion from Oregon, and also $1.5 billion from the federal government to replace that Columbia River bridge. So there's still a lot of pieces there that have to come together to be able to get that bridge fully funded to demolish it and rebuild a new one. Moving into some other items that we saw in 2022, we had obviously some large funding pieces for the Japanese beetle response that has been seen in the lower Yakima Valley. We're trying to keep the Japanese beetle from spreading throughout the state. There was money in the Department of Ag budget to respond to that. The green crabs, invasive green crabs that we've been seeing, there was about a $10 million funding source to catch those crabs and destroy them. And then probably the biggest piece that was passed in 2021, which was the cap and trade program, very simple, pretty much just cut and pasted from the state of California. Oregon has also moved in the direction of a cap and trade program as well. Washington passed that in 2021. It was worked on extensively during the 2022 session for implementation. And the first cap and trade auction credit will take place, credit auction will take place February of 2023. And why that's important is because the agricultural industry was widely removed from the direct impact of cap and trade. However, in a roundabout way, we're going to get absolutely demolished by the cap and trade program in terms of fuel costs. There's a low carbon fuel standard that was passed at the same time as the cap and trade program. And there's a lot of what I would say sort of inputs to agriculture that are going to be impacted by the cap and trade program. We are hoping that similar to California, a lot of energy credits may end up being produced by farmers in Washington state and being able to auction those credits off on the open market. I'll give you an example of a study that was done for the cap and trade program here in Washington. As I said, it'll start in February of 2023. And those credits, the first study showed that those credits would be about $25 per credit. Anything raised in that auction would go into the general fund, and it's basically dispersed into a lot of different programs throughout the state to pay for lots of different sort of environmental type projects. The latest study that was done shows that those credits are going to sell for $47 a piece. So the state budget basically budgeted $25 per credit. It looks like those credits may sell for close to $50 a piece. So it would double amount of money that is collected by the state through those auctions. What that means, a lot of dairy farmers are probably going to be encouraged to put in anaerobic digesters to create energy credits and be able to sell those as a revenue source. There's going to be a lot of farmers encouraged to purchase the newest tractors and probably some sort of subsidies to be able to do that so that they're cleaner burning, maybe a different type of fuel in the future. And it goes hand in hand with what Governor Inslee has proposed recently. And most of us, most of you in the room probably have read this through the newspapers and Farm Bureau newsletter. But there's a proposal right now by the governor's office to eliminate diesel trucks, medium size and large size diesel trucks by 2042. I think at this point, from everything I've read and everybody I've talked to, that sounds like a pretty difficult target to hit by 2042, but it sort of gives you an idea of what the leadership of the state is sort of headed towards in terms of policy. We also are going to see in 2023 legislation, I'll sort of shift to the 2023 year. We already have been told that we're probably going to look at a buffer bill that was worked on in 2022. That buffer bill would basically create a buffer around any sort of water source on your property. The number last year was 100 feet on each side of that water source. This year, they're talking about 250 feet on each side. There was a study done at a dairy farm. If they took 250 feet buffer on each side of the water source, it would basically put the farm completely out of business. So it's obviously an important issue. There's a lot of players involved in that coalition, Washington Friends of Farms and Forests and all of the Dairy Federation members. Basically, it's going to be the biggest issue that agriculture sees probably in the next 10 years. So a lot of people working on that. I would highly encourage you to reach out to your legislators and talk to them about your situation on the farm, what a 100-foot buffer would look like and what a 250-foot buffer would look like on your property. Ag overtime, I'll touch on that one more time. And basically, yeah, you got a question? No, that would not include canals that are man-made. So at least that's my understanding of it. I probably should ask that question to be sure about that. But if it's man-made, if it's not a natural creek or water source, then I think it's exempt. So I'll touch real briefly on agricultural overtime again. There is a bill that was introduced last session, didn't get a hearing, which sort of tells you probably where it's headed this year as well. But basically, it would give growers an opportunity for 12 weeks of the year to say you're exempt from the ag overtime. That way, during harvest, you could work more than the 48-hour limit this year. I don't hold high hopes for that bill. Like I said, last year it didn't even get a hearing, so I'm guessing it would probably see the same fate this coming year. There's a 139-page bill that deals with agricultural packaging and the consumer's responsibility to recycle that packaging, which would then fall back onto the company or the farm that is packaging produce. Right now, there's a broad exemption for agriculture unless it has the farm's brand or name on the packaging. Then you would be responsible for the end consumer recycling of that plastic. The goal there in that bill, and like I said, it's if you want some good reading material right before bed to put you to sleep, it's a good one. 139 pages, and basically it would say by 2050, 95% of all plastics used in Washington State would have to be able to be reused in another piece of packaging by that 2050 mark. So that's it's a pretty broad timeline. Gives us a lot of time, but it is also 95% at that point. So almost every piece of packaging would have to be able to be recycled. The other issue I wanted to bring up, and I'll wrap it up here pretty soon, but is the spotted lanternfly. There's now a advisory group that has been put together. Some of you may be familiar with this plant pest, invasive pest, and it is currently residing in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. It was just found in New Jersey as well. But it's an invasive plant pest. And so the state has put together an advisory group, which may end up turning into a response group if it arrives here in Washington. But it's an important issue. I would highly recommend all of you get familiar with the spotted lanternfly. It's going to be similar to the Japanese beetle, but it likes to attack fruit trees and any sort of vine fruit. So that would be important to everybody in this room. But it has not appeared yet in Washington State, like I said, but it is what they call a hitchhiker pest, and it likes to get on railroad cars and train cars and make its way across the country, hitchhiking on different transportation methods. So keep an eye on that. I think I will leave it there at this point. Pretty much covered everything on my notes, and I'm happy to take a few minutes of questions if there's any questions or anything that I can maybe clarify and get the information back to Henry or to Alan. But if you have questions, I'm happy to take those. I will just say, as a homework assignment, go call those 6 legislators that I talked about from the 40th and 42nd and introduce yourself and get to know them, because you play a very important role in the policy and regulations that are passed in Olympia that impact growers in Washington State. So don't be bashful. Don't be shy about it. Call them up, leave your cell phone number, and tell them to give you a call if they have any questions about the buffer bill or anything like that. Get on their list of people to call. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben.
Hey, before we let him escape, does anyone have any questions or anything you want to gripe about the Ben? Yes. Wait a minute, you're his board member.
I just want to say, hey, I've seen a couple people around here. They're in 39th district or in the 10th district, and you're not off the hook, right? You need to talk to your elected representative. We actually have a new representative in the 10th and a new representative in the 39th too. So maybe it's education.
That's the most political thing I've ever heard you say, Tom. Okay, anything else? Okay, we're going to go for our next speaker. Our next speaker is a real VIP, Casey Cronquist. He is the president of the U.S. High Bush Blueberry Council and the North American Blueberry Council. Interestingly enough, he went to school in Shelton, Washington. One of his first paying gigs was start with the M. What was it?
Mason County
Mason County
Chamber of
Commerce. I met him of all places in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, when he was the executive director of the California Cut Flower Commission. I was there talking blueberries. He was there talking flowers. But he's been you're on your third year of running the U.S. High Bush Blueberry Council, which is our federal marketing order for blueberries. And he has fundamentally reorganized every aspect of that operation. The amount of money that's come in has increased a lot. So we got more money and more energy going on. And we are in the process of the Washington. You're going to hear about it at 1:30 at the Washington Blueberry Commission. which I believe is in this meeting at 1:30. So you want to come listen to that. We are in the process of reordering some things in the Blueberry Commission to more closely align with the U.S. High Coast Blueberry Council. But we'll talk about it at 1:30. Casey, why don't you get going?
All right.
Thank you, Casey.
Yeah, that was a great warm introduction. Could have been warmer. Just for the record. Well, Alan, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back with all of you here in Washington. Of course, as Alan described, I love being back in Washington. Spent a lot of years here. My family's still here. Hope to meet up with my parents later here later tonight, depending on the weather, of course. But it's great to be back. I really do appreciate the opportunity to kind of share a little bit about what we're up to. We have changed quite a bit of things. We're going to talk a little bit about that this morning. And then I'm saving a lot of the production information and information on the different growing regions for our talk this afternoon. So after lunch, and I know I'm between you and lunch, and so I'm going to move pretty quickly just so that we can get through a lot of the information I have to share with all of you. But we're also going to be around too, so we won't be able to do a lot of deep diving into all of the work that we're doing on your behalf as the blueberry industry, but we'll be able to do some cursory things that hopefully get you asking questions. Of course, I don't mind asking answering questions while walking through some presentation. So I'll just get started here. We did just wrap up a fall meeting in Nashville. So we had about 350 folks from the industry join us in Nashville for what we're calling our summit. It was a great opportunity to get together again and just talk about the dynamics of the blueberry industry, what's happening, and where we're headed. Of course, passing our program budgets during those meetings. But one thing that I could just share with all of you that I really appreciate about working for the blueberry industry is just the family connection that it has. Specifically, we've had now the second time since I've been here, the Blueberry Band come and play during our conference. And if you haven't heard the Blueberry Band play, it's remarkable. If you're talking about growers that are coming from all different parts of the country, and I like the metaphor that it represents because, you know, they don't play with each other all year long, but they come together at our conference and they pick up their different instruments and they're able to light up the stage. And people don't want them to, like, I'm the guy that has to get up and tell them last song, and it's really the toughest part of my job, you know, because everybody wants to hear these guys keep playing. So you got guys like Art Valletta and Cor Brazelton, Dave Brazelton, Brittany, John and Rhonda Bennett from Georgia. But it's just a good example of what it's like to work for the blueberry industry, where people come together, they, you know, work together and they make music happen. And it's just, you don't find this in a lot of industries. As Alan pointed out, I was in the floral industry. We didn't have a floral band. It was a thing. Blueberries, it's really remarkable to see how people come together to work together, which is kind of brings me to how our organizations work on behalf of the industry. So both USHBC and NABC are two organizations that now have been around for quite some time. How many of you are familiar with the North American Blueberry Council? Yeah, so that's our trade organization. And then there's the checkoff program, which is the larger of the two in terms of budget, the federal RMP program, the USHBC. But I like to just start here because there's some confusion about between them and what does one do that the other one doesn't do. So as a USDA program overseen by USDA, the USHBC is that checkoff program that collects the assessments. It has the larger the budgets. Those dollars are strictly used for promotion and research. And then we don't lobby. So unlike what Ben was just talking about, the USHBC steers clear away from that activity of lobbying. And we represent kind of everybody with those assessment dollars. So we're here to just kind of lift the category. On the North American Blueberry side, it's a volunteer trade organization. It's got membership dues. So how many of you, I know many of you are familiar with NABC. How many of you are members of NABC? Yeah, that's an issue. So let's talk about that after I come off the stage. But that's the one that needs membership dues in order to operate. So one's an assessment based, one's a volunteer contribution. And you can kind of see here that, you know, I would say we have done not a good job of soliciting that membership and trying to grow that membership. We'll talk more about that as well. But we are the organization on that side that can negotiate. We do hire a Ben on behalf of the industry. We actually have a lobby firm. And we also have a new hire opportunity that we'll talk about too that's coming up. We developed the policy and position papers, and we have about 170 members currently involved with the North American Blueberry Council. So this is just a quick run through, just like what one does, what the other one does in kind of a visual format. But right now we're running Times Square ads on behalf of the industry in Times Square for the fourth quarter of this year. So there's a lot of grab a boost of blue in the months of October, November, and December. And in Times Square, this is where the USHBC is doing the promotion, right? So that's what USHBC, this is the kind of activity that USHBC is doing right now on behalf of the industry. That would be a promotion program. But then when we go to Washington, D.C. as a group, that group that you see here, they're working on behalf of the North American Blueberry Council because they're doing the activity of working the Hill, advocating on behalf of their interests. We've got our policy papers. We bring those to Washington, D.C. So that's going to be happening on the North American blueberry side. And how many of you have heard of the the Business of Blueberry podcast? So this would be an activity that's taking place on the USHBC site. So that's a show we produce every week, talking about different issues that are taking place in the industry. It's been quite popular. It was born out of the pandemic. We couldn't get together as an industry, so it became a really good resource of communicating to the industry. And since then, we found it to just be a really good resource. We keep that podcast going every week. And then what I like about this slide is it shows that on one hand, we may be working with members of Congress like Rick Larson to pass National Blueberry Month as a resolution in Washington, D.C., but it's USHBC that takes that information and then markets it. So we may do some good work in Washington with North American Blueberry Council, but it takes dollars and a promotion program to really make consumers be aware that July is National Blueberry Month, which is a power period that we promote throughout the year. So I like how these kind of the synergy and the way we work together as an organization on behalf of the industry. You can kind of see between those two activities how they work together. So just as I wanted to point out here, the budgets between the two organizations, Alan's right, we have increased the size of the two organizations over the last couple of years. So now, I think when I started, NABC was around $250,000. We're almost approaching to about $1 million, which honestly, an organization representing the blueberry industry should be much larger than that as a trade organization. But we're working on that. That's something that is part of my kind of mandate by the board, is to increase the membership, increase the budget of the North American Blueberry Council, because it needs that resource to do the kinds of things that Rick was talking about in his comments on advocating on your behalf. And money does help in that activity. So we're trying to grow that program budget. We're trying to grow our membership. An organization presenting the blueberry industry should be much larger than 170 members. Again, priorities that we're working on. But that was established in 1965, and it was the organization that helped, birth the USHBC in 2000. And at that point, I think that's where it became less a priority to have a membership organization, because you now had this checkoff organization that could do so much with its resources. Again, one's a $15 million program plus, and the other is about $1 million. This is the staff we have now at the NABC and USHBC, which has actually grown quite a bit since the last time I spoke. We've hired 3 or 4 more people since I was here last year. But we've got folks working in our industry and engagement pillar. So Amanda Griffin is with us. She's in the back. So you'll see her with me this week. But she's the VP of Engagement and Education. She works with Mandy and Stacy on our events and hosting our meetings. She also is responsible for our leadership program, which just recently launched, which is a really exciting program for folks in our industry to get involved, not just with what we do, but what the industry is working towards. Renata Dalton was with us last night. She's the director of global business development. So she was meeting with exporters here in Washington yesterday to try to talk about our vision for doubling exports, which we'll talk more about. Many of you already know Dr. Leslie Wada. She's our senior director of health research. So she's been a contractor for a long time, but last year we hired her on board as staff because we're just at a place in dialogue in Washington, D.C., where we need our own doctor in the house to talk about the health benefits of blueberries. And I don't think that is going to go away for as long as the USHBC is here. So she's moved from a contractor role over to a paid position on staff. Joe Vargas just joined us. He's the director of business intelligence. He's actually working on slides right now that I'll be able to share with you this afternoon, but a really great resource to the industry and what he's bringing to the table for organization. Adam Winland and Ross work on our finance and compliance, so helping collect the assessments, obviously a big part of what the two of them do. Andrea Walters works closely with me and works with our team, and Julie, director of operations. I hit everyone but Kurt, who's with us in the back. So Kurt's a part of our VP. He's a VP of integrated marketing communications globally. So working with him over the last 6 months, he's doing a great job helping us elevate our program goals in the area of marketing and communications. And so I would certainly encourage you to grab Kurt and talk to him more about our promotion program with any of the things I'm talking about, inspire a conversation further there. We also have plans to hire a few more people this year. The director of communications is we've got currently contract working that. We're going to bring that in-house as well as a digital content manager that would work with our director of communications. And then the director of governmental affairs is actually a position that was born out of what Rick was talking about yesterday. It was a recognition that we needed somebody on staff following the floods here, because I was able to walk through a lot of what Alan was able to show me last year up in Whatcom County when those floods took place. And the challenge I faced leaving Alan and the situation here was, we just needed somebody who could just actually keep following up with Rick and others on those kinds of issues, not just here in Washington, but certainly on any of the issues around the country where there's a state growing region that needs assistance in governmental affairs. So it was kind of at that point where we recognized that need to bring somebody on staff at the North American Blueberry Council to help continue to advocate on behalf of the industry for issues like that, and be at the table with other commodities when advocating for whether it's disaster relief. What we're really looking forward to in this position is somebody who could stay on the Farm Bill with our lobby team in Washington, D.C. A lot of those programs that Rick was talking about in his remarks, whether it's for MAP funding or especially crop block grant, these are all things that are important to all the states. And those are the things that we want the industry to be represented of when Farm Bill negotiations take place in the new Congress. So the Director of Governmental Affairs position is something I've been looking forward to for a while. And then finally, the Director of Very Smart, and that actually will be somebody that works closely with Amanda on providing industry services. So thinking of sustainability and food safety and data and insights. So somebody that can work in that very smart area that we're calling it very smart because it's very smart. And we think that will be something that all of the industry can take advantage of in terms of services from our program. So the supply and demand challenge, and I mentioned here, talked about it last night, that when we're still planting everywhere. So, whether I'm in Washington State or I'm in Florida, there's, Michigan's replanting new fruit. There's a lot of investment still going in the ground. And, I don't, there's no magic solution to this, but I think the one thing that you can count on from the USHBC is that we're going to focus on the demand services. We're going to focus on really trying to increase the interest in blueberries over time. And some of you have seen this before because this becomes a really important narrative for our industry to be thinking through when you consider where we've been over the last 20 years. You've experienced a tremendous amount of growth in driving awareness, specifically here in this country, where lots of people now are aware of blueberries. But what we're really focused on at the USHBC is trying to inspire that next evolution of our industry's program into the innovation era, where we're focused on getting into the blueberries into places that we currently aren't today. Household penetration rate for blueberries is only at 52%, especially, when you consider strawberries is really roughly at 77%. We have a tremendous runway still left to try and drive blueberries into more households in the United States. And we can talk more about the food service channel, which is not very well penetrated by blueberries for lots of reasons. We could talk about that. Food ingredient is also another channel where we haven't spent a lot of time developing the kind of penetration that other food ingredients have, where we have a lot of runway left there. And then finally, retail. This was the second year we've dedicated resources to retail promotions on your behalf. So we're getting into the kind of merchandising space and working with buyers at retail to market blueberries to consumers with our new Grab a Booster food program. So there's a lot of really exciting things that we're doing that we haven't done as an industry yet, that we're beginning to really dive into in a big way with more resources. So we're at an inflection point. We've got a responsibility to all of you here in terms of the pounds that are coming on, in terms of that supply that we're talking about. And that solution is driving demand. There's lots of places that we're working on making that happen. So recently, our strategic plan was passed in 2021, where we actually updated our vision to make blueberries the world's favorite fruit. And this is an ambitious goal. I remember when the board was kind of discussing this and debating what the actual vision for our organization should be, that I really swallowed hard when they decided, like, oh no, we're going for tomatoes and mangoes is out. Blueberries is going to be the best, and it's ambitious. It's something that you aspire for, but it certainly has created a lot of great conversations in our industry about what that's going to take. And one of the things that we developed in order to help make that happen was a really great program, and hopefully you've seen it. Hopefully you're considering using it if you're not already. Is a Grab a Booster Blue program. So this is a license program. You have to be a licensee. You have to sign up for it to use it. But it can be used on pack. It's what we're using at retail. It's what we're using around the world at this point. We're being requested now. In fact, we were in Thailand a couple of weeks ago for a trade show there, Asia Fruit Logistica, and we don't sell any blueberries into Australia. But my counterpart in Australia asked if they could license Grab a Boost of Blue because they found that it was such a great call to action for consumers to want to consider all the benefits of blueberries. They didn't have anything better. So they were wondering if it would be okay if they could leverage our Grab a Boost of Blue program for marketing to consumers in Australia. So we're getting a lot of great traction for this. And we've done a lot of research with consumers about this call to action. And we're finding that it does help drive sales. And so we're working with our marketers. We've got about 67 licensees that are able to take advantage of this throughout the year. And we're helping to better quarterback our responsibility of marketing and promotion throughout the year using what we call our promotion periods or power periods. And so we produce a promotion calendar now for the industry well in advance so that we can better coordinate our call to action, this Grab a Boost of Blue message, so that more people can take advantage of where we're putting the investment on your behalf into these power periods and leveraging those power periods together. Now, just because we have power periods doesn't mean that we're not promoting all year long. We are always doing digital marketing and advertising. So you're thinking about social media, the commercials we play on YouTube, Hulu, those types of programs where consumers are today. We're still marketing in those spaces all year long. But we do like these power periods, and we do like associating blueberries with these health months, or in this case, we've got National Diabetes Month, National Fruits and Vegetables Month, and of course, we've got our own power period that is National Blueberry Day, or National Blueberry Month, where we do a lot of work promoting blueberries in the month of July. So in 2 years, we've really driven the awareness for Grab a Boost of Blue, and we've even asked consumers their opinion on it. But we've got those 67 licensees. We're starting to see marketers put it on pack. We've also got a lot of retailers who are taking advantage of it. We'll talk a little bit about that program here shortly. And we see it driving demand. And you can see the consumer research we've done here where we're asking them, what do they think about the Grab a Boost of Blue? And 43 to 82% of users are already familiar with that logo. So they're starting to see it in the marketplace. It's starting to resonate. 67 to 85% of users say Grab a Boost of Blue. Grab a Boost of Blue logo and slogan motivates them to eat more blueberries. And so this is really just important information for us to keep gathering and replaying back to the industry so that you can see that when we're working with our marketers and our packers and our industry to leverage this, it's accessible to them. And the more of us that are using it, the more widely it gets known. And so it's a really great call to action. You can see some of the other organizations that are taking advantage of it, Sunbelt, Nature Right, and Wish Farms got down in Florida has a big billboard that they took some pictures of and sent it to us showing how they were integrating Grab a Boost of Blue there in Florida. So this is something I'm really proud of. I think our team's really excited about the growth of it over the last couple of years and ways in which that, we're really championing everybody's use of this in the marketplace. To say the same thing the same way makes it even louder. So our retail program is something, like I mentioned before, we weren't very heavy in it at all. Recently, we started doing pilot programs, reaching out to buyers at retail, asking if they'd like to learn more about our Grab a Boost of Blue program and how it could work for them. But it's been really validating to go through that experience with those retailers and find that this is something that does drive sales for them. We worked over the summer with a gentleman, Don Ladoff, who specializes in merchandising. So we had a lot of great relationships with retailers that we could work with. But like I said, it really does validate the messaging does work and it does help those buyers drive sales in their store. Here's some of the examples. This is one of my favorites from Spartan Nash, where their team just took advantage of the artwork and the different things that we could give their team that they could create in store for those point of purchase decisions. And also what I like about this is it's tying back to the center store. So it's encouraging not just the purchase of blueberries in the produce aisle, but if somebody's thinking about baking or they're thinking about doing something that they'd like to cook, it's calling them back, whether it's fresh or frozen, to consider blueberries as an ingredient. So they did a really great job with that. You can see how it was used in their circulars. So we have a number of examples of how this played out over the course of the summer with a number of different retailers. Kurt would be happy to talk more about the success we saw there, but it just has inspired us to do even more. So overall, there was really good success story in the aggregate of everything that we did this summer, 12.5% points above the rest of the market year over year growth. And that those who did display contests with Grab a Boost of Blue were 25% over the rest of the market during that same period of time. So these are things that really validate what we're doing in the berry patch, but specifically for blueberries in helping drive sales. So that actually has then got our committee, our promotion committee, even more excited about doing more of this activity in retail. A lot of what we found with the resources that were provided to us through our MOU funds were, what worked, what didn't work. And this was certainly an area that we wanted to spend more resources. So we're going to be working instead of, I think, seven retailers this summer. We're going to work with 25 different retailers, and we're adding 2 more power periods to the effort. 2020. Just a quick picture of us. This is our team. This was the first time, well, technically it was the first show they've ever had, but the International Fresh Produce Show held in Orlando, what used to be the Old Fresh Summit, biggest produce show in the country, was our first big opportunity to show there. So when it was Fresh Summit, we hadn't done it, but we did it this year, and we took our team, and we really, I think, did a great job talking with retailers, actually even marketers, people who are walking the floor to explain what it is that we could do with Grab a Boost of Blue with them. Really attracted a lot of people, and I think our team showed well representing all of you there in Orlando this year. We also then, after that show took off, I mentioned we went to Thailand and did the Fruit Logistica show in Asia, and that was a really great show with the same sort of results. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The other part that I think really anchors a lot of our strategy in how we go to market, the Grab a Boost of Blue messaging is built off the health halo that blueberries represents. We're unlike a lot of commodities that are kind of scrambling right now with the Biden administration's interest in trying to drive, health and nutrition conversation. The president just held a health and nutrition conference in Washington, D.C. in September, and blueberries is, ready to go. We have the research. We can talk to Washington, FDA, USDA about the benefits of blueberries. We've got all of this history that we've spent resources on investment in federal or in health research. And the time is really now for blueberries to shine with that kind of detail for the administration to understand what blueberries could do for kids in schools. They've got so much purchase power. And we're really ready to get engaged over the next farm bill with the new dietary guidelines. And certainly if you're familiar with the FDA's conversation about the term healthy and what healthy represents to consumers. And so we're working hard to put this information in front of those. We actually have our own conference next week in Washington, D.C., led by Dr. Wada, and a number of folks that will be together in Washington, really to try to attract more people in Washington to the conversation we're having about the benefits of blueberries. So it's an exciting time. Again, credit to this industry for having the forethought of health research and investing, spending the money year after year, because it has produced these results where we've got 17 studies, 63 peer-reviewed publications, and then we've also been a part of more than $40 million of other research that has gone on. So it's not, once you get into this business, it's not just the money you're spending, you're also contributing money that other people are spending to help research and able to deliver that there as well. So this is a big shining star for what USHBC represents back to the industry year in and year out. Like I mentioned, the president just wrapped up his health and nutrition conference. We're going to be going to Washington next week to kind of plug in with that conversation in Washington, D.C., make sure that people are aware of what we have in terms of health research that can help elevate blueberries in those different conversations that are taking place in Washington. We're also, like I mentioned yesterday, meeting with exporters in our industry who are focused on diversifying their business in global marketing and talking about MAP money that Rick Larson was talking about that we collect on behalf of the industry. So we have about $600,000 that we collect from MAP funds, and then we match that MAP fund dollar for dollar with our sellers in order to have roughly a $1.2 million program that helps us try to develop markets around the world. So we're working closely with Alan and other commissions to help develop those markets globally. So we actually work on the NABC side to open the markets on behalf of the industry, and then USHBC takes that MAP money and moves into the market to help promote and develop those marketplaces. The nice thing that I like about the future of export is, yes, we have a goal of doubling it, but kind of like the West Coast was for many years, a lot of these countries aren't familiar with blueberries. So what we've seen in the U.S. is a model of creating awareness, driving demand, and having 365 days worth of access. And that's really what helps help blueberries be as successful as it's become. is that it's always in the store. It's always on the front of the shelf. And the market really, the retailers really enjoy the profitability of blueberries within their store. So they put it in a premium place. We're able to take that model and start talking to these other countries about what blueberries could do for them, and working with our state organizations to try to develop those marketplaces with the MAP dollars that we have. And we have an ambitious goal to double those exports. Right now, we're just under 5% of our total production going overseas to these different markets. And our goal is to try to get to 10% and beyond in order to kind of help diverse where our fruit goes. And I think right now it's kind of hard to imagine some of farms leaving this market for other foreign markets. But this market won't always be like it is today. So making sure that we have these trade channels open for different places to move our fruit are going to be important. And we've developed the USA Blueberries logo just for that. So for those of you that don't have a USA Blueberries hat yet, certainly talk to Amanda or Kurt or myself. We've got a few of these left, but this is the logo that we're using globally to help identify what blueberries are USA. And of course, we're working with other states like Washington, where they can adopt the program and include Washington as part of that program underneath our logo. And just really trying to be the point of the spear, kind of the umbrella organization that helps drive that, because it's not just going to be about Washington. It's about whether or not we can keep the supply in those stores. So if it's Washington or it's Oregon or it's California, just kind of everybody working together to make sure that that supply be there for those retailers who are counting on it, and us working together to make sure that we can develop these markets. This was our group in Thailand. So I share this just because we do have 7 country reps. So these folks that were with us in Thailand are from all over the Southeast Asia and India, but joined us in Thailand in order to work with the crowd that was there to look at our product or look at our blueberries. But an important group who are on the ground in these countries that we contract with in Vietnam or Malaysia. We've got China, India, Japan, and those are all important boots on the ground in order to help drive those marketplaces. And it was great to finally meet them. Since I've been here, I hadn't been able to travel anywhere due to the pandemic. And so this was our first chance to kind of all get together. And you guys see Alan poking his head out in the back. We invited Alan to join us. It was great to have him see what it was that we were working on. And I think that's where he and I both agree that there's a lot of alignment that we could be organizing with, not just in Washington, but with Oregon and California, to try and drive more blueberries to more places around the world. I mentioned this earlier that, we recently did a consumer research, what we call a UNA or an ANU, a usage and attitude study. We do this on a regular basis in order to kind of just make sure that we're targeting the right audience for our marketing purposes. But again, it just confirmed what we'd already been saying, is that we just don't have the household penetration rate that I think we'd all like to have in order to drive that demand or increase that consumption. So at 51% over the last 3 months. But what also is important about this is you can see that there's 30% of users who are open to blueberries. So they haven't said no. There is certainly a group, amazingly, I met one on a plane once, doesn't like blueberries. But there is a group of people who that are probably non-users and won't really become a target audience for us to go after. But the non-users but open really creates that other opportunity for us to really market to that group, as well as pull that group that's already eating blueberries along the consumption chain, which is kind of like the weekly. You see that there's 53% of those folks that are eating weekly. But what was really interesting about this last study is that we found that there is a multi-day group. And inside that multi-day group, there is a super majority, like 70% of that multi-day user are men. Yeah. But we were really big on marketing to busy moms, that kind of demographic for a long time. We still are. But when we did this last UNA, we found that in that super user group, 70% of that super user group is men. And so we're kind of digging in on that, trying to understand what is it about blueberries that those super users are finding so important. We assume it's health, of course. But it was just a really interesting piece of research to pull out of this last group to find that men were the super users. Maybe it's just me, but I mean, it's kind of interesting, right? Super users, multi-day. So we're actually excited about this entire group because we really feel like this is the super fan community. And so our goal as USHBC is we have roughly a 275,000 kind of audience of people that we talk to on a regular basis within our network of different platforms. We want to grow that super fan base now that we kind of know who we're targeting up to almost 750,000 people over the next several years in order to kind of create that ripple effect of energy that I think is out there for blueberries. So by creating a larger super fan base, we really think that's going to have a long-term effect on how we pull all of the other user groups through eating more. So more super users creates more consumption. So our team's currently working on a plan to kind of address that and how do we bring more people across this. So we think a large part of that success is going to be driving our Grab a Booster Blue program into the hands of consumers. One of the things that we took away from our UNA was that it actually kind of like a Nike shirt, they're willing to wear it if we provide it to them. So trying to think through like what can we create that people will wear, what kinds of things beyond just purchasing the blueberries would make it more of a blueberry lifestyle, something that people really are proud of and want to represent on their person. So how are we going to accomplish all this? Well, we need to do more with more. And we've heard the need to do more with less. We've done that for a long time. But we're in a situation where blueberries really does have the opportunity to kind of create the inflection point it needs to drive the next wave. And so the North American Blueberry Council over the last several years, well, actually the last year and a half, has been really putting a lot of work towards trying to drive more resources into this program. And in part, coming out of a 201 investigation in 2021, where there was clearly a lot of frustration and concern with the future of the industry. And so the North American Blueberry Council went to work, brought people back around the table after that investigation concluded, and really came around this idea of we need to do more with more. We need to drive demand. We need to increase the consumption of blueberries. We need more resources to do that. So what they developed was a plan that's really inspired largely from what we've seen the avocado industry do over time, which is, well, increasing of consumption went way up, meaning more supply was coming into the country. They were actually able to realize a real price increase slightly over time during that same time period, which is an important model for us to consider on how do they do that? How do they increase so much supply into the marketplace while actually increasing the overall real price per pound back to the industry? So, of course, we know that they have about 2.5 cents per pound as part of their assessment. So having a larger budget, being able to expand their marketing opportunities certainly help drive demand and then help the producers in terms of retaining that real price back to the farm. So with that as our inspiration, they launched a MOU, a memorandum of understanding within the industry, asking the importers of record to increase voluntarily their assessment into the program. So our goal was to try and reach 2.7. Roughly, the MOU was requiring that you had a supermajority of the industry participating in this before it went into effect, essentially making sure that just wasn't a couple people giving a few more dollars. It was the supermajority of the industry giving. And we, of course, wanted to surpass that with a goal of trying to reach 3 million. So in 2020, we used that as our benchmark. There was about $5.4 million collected from imports over the course of that year. So we needed to at least reach half of over half of it. And we did back in December of last year. So just about this time last year, we hit that fundraising goal. The MOU went into effect and we've begun collecting on those dollars. And those dollars are dedicated for 3 priorities that the task force came up with. Number 1 was marketing, drive demand. We needed to increase more demand. We needed more resources to drive that demand, which is focused on now. They also wanted to make sure that we had better data. There's a long conversation about the fact that we just don't know what we don't know when we're talking about either other production regions or our own production regions. And so there was really a call to USHBC to get sharp on our numbers. You need to figure this out. You need to help us understand what is it that the market's really doing, what is it that supply is really doing, and get better at data and insights. So that's why we hired Joe Vargas, and he's doing a great job right now putting our program together on behalf of the industry. And then finally, I talked a little bit about the priority of advocacy. So it was clear that, once the 201 investigation concluded and there wasn't going to be, really any remedy offered back to the domestic industry, that an advocacy program was going to be really important going into this next farm bill. So how could NABC be working in Washington to drive those resources through the farm bill back to our farms? So $250,000 was dedicated towards NABC to the effort of advocacy in Washington, advocacy in those areas that we find really important on behalf of the industry to try to bring those resources back. So this is the balance of the funds. again, like I mentioned, one of the main priorities of those funds is that data and insights program. So if you haven't heard about our website where we've got our data and insights, this is where Joe's spending the bulk of his time really working with the industry to bring in their data in order to produce that data and aggregate it so that there's a better source of information, a more clear source, a clean source, and a source that people can rely on going forward in terms of looking at what our industry is doing over time. There's a lot of frustration sometimes, maybe every day, with the USDA AMS program. But we're looking on a program that we build within our house that provides that better information back to the industry. So Joe's working on this. It's a great tool right now using the information that we have. It kind of gives you a sense of what we're building. But he's working back end, working with the MOU contributors and anybody really who wants to provide data into the system so that we have a better source, a more reliable source of information for the entire industry. And like I said, this is our job call or our job requisition for the governmental affairs position that we're hiring for right now. So I like Ben's talk. You know, we're basically looking to hire our own Ben and somebody that can work on the federal level on behalf of the industry, but also work within the states and work with folks like Ben on what priorities our industry has for blueberries. So we're in the middle of that process. We just hired a lobby firm in Washington, D.C., so we do actually have boots on the ground in Washington now, taking over for Dan Haley, which many of you may have known Dan when he was working on our behalf in Washington for many years. He just retired. And so we've since transitioned to a company called Monument Advocacy in Washington, D.C., that we're really excited to be working with, but we're adding the additional person of having a director of governmental affairs work with us to work with them, whether it's in our office or elsewhere throughout the United States. So if you know somebody, this is happening right now, and we'd love to talk to anybody who would like to work with us on our governmental affairs group. So this is kind of where we started, but those MOU dollars that we're talking about is where we think we can actually increase the effectiveness of what that spend is going to represent over time. So actually lifting that wave even higher in order to address some of the supply challenges. Our current program, you know, on the trajectory that it is designed to increase that next wave. But it's really important that these next dollars that we pull in, and we're still pulling more dollars in, working with more people who'd like to sign on to that MOU agreement going forward. These are the companies that we have today. We actually have a few of those companies here with us. Steve and the Berry Hill team were gracious to be one of our first Canadian MOU contributors, signatory members. And then we also signed ACP here from Peru. They represent our very first exporter MOU contributors. The board, the North American Blueberry Council Board, originally started with an importer of record MOU, which was anybody who was importing blueberries from other countries to sign on. But since launched two more MOUs, the exporter and the Canadian MOU, in order to increase even more resources, being able to help this program in order to help elevate our program. So that's the group. We're trying to increase it. So we're constantly meeting with other companies, other marketing, other importers of record to be a part of this to help us grow our program. And this afternoon, when I'm with Alan, we're talking more about kind of the production numbers. I'll talk a little bit more about what we're working on here with those companies. So yeah, our next meeting is in San Diego, which we're really excited about. If you haven't registered, please plan on joining us. Much like a conference here, we're looking forward to having a great group of people come together, you know, blueberry focused. We're actually turning the spring meeting into more of a convention, kind of like what you're seeing here with more equipment and vendors participating in order to supply the industry. But this is a program that's going to grow quite a bit over the next couple of years under Amanda's leadership, and our vision to just kind of be a one-stop shop for the blueberry industry once a year for things that people are looking for, people they want to talk to. It's a great networking opportunity, just like Nashville was in the spring. So twice a year, we hold these gatherings. Our next one is in San Diego in February. So please plan on joining us then. All right. That's it from me for now. I look forward to my conversation with Alan and the rest of you this afternoon, but I'm happy to field any questions, or if anybody's got any thoughts, feelings, questions, or suggestions. Yes. Yes. So she's asking, are we planning on expanding any of these other places? And the answer is always yes, but for instance, right now we've got effort with New Zealand and Israel, to open those two markets for our industry. The challenge we're really facing right now is how many doors we can open. It's which ones do people really go, which one do people really want to commit to. Our biggest challenge, much like I think retailers face here, is if you sell somebody blueberries today, they're not there next year, you really hurt the relationship. In the export business, we're talking about hurting an entire, relationship with an entire country. And, those trade routes are hard to open the first time, and they're even a bit more difficult when you go there and don't go back. So it's an effort on our part. Part of the reason we were here this week was to sit down with exporters. We really do feel like, in the case of Washington State, that frozen is going to be a big part of meeting this goal, and we need a lot more frozen food committed to these trade routes in order to keep those doors open. So our goal is to continue to work with our industry here in order to double those markets. Is not so much that we need more markets. We have a lot of markets. We're just not really good at going into those markets today. Not as good as we need to be in order to hit that goal. So our goal, our purpose up here this week, is really to kind of rally the not just the processors, but the moving fresh as well. But in order to hit that number, the doubling of exports, it's going to take a lot of folks to even those trade. So.
What are the major points upon which we select a country? And
yeah.
like,
There's
I
no
know
method.
it's a big debate,
Yeah.
but
No,
just
that's not
out of
debate.
curiosity.
You know how we pick different markets? You know how markets open?
Yeah, how
All
like I can see like near the Japan, it's South Korea, Taiwan, China, India,
Yeah.
none of them. So what are the major portion you want to see and then pick a country?
Well, so her question is, how do we prioritize which markets? Well, sometimes it's not our priority, right? So there'll be bilateral trade agreements going on between two countries. And if we've inserted ourselves early on and saying, well, we'd like to someday, 15 years from now, have access to this country. Then when the US government starts bilateral trade agreements, one of the things they'll pull up into that conversation is, hey, we also want to have access for our people. So that's oftentimes, it may not be, in the case of it, actually New Zealand right now, I think we forgot that we put in a request to have access. I don't even know who it was that wanted access to New Zealand. But at some point we did 15 years ago. Now they're just now having conversations and trade inside of New Zealand for it. And so that's how it's crazy. Sometimes it takes that long, and that's how it ends up. What's your question? Oh,
Sometimes it's state to a country.
Yeah.
Like Oregon, South, Washington.
yeah, sometimes it can be that. Oftentimes it's categorical. So the APHIS, who is responsible for bugs and dirt responsibilities to take on, they want to work on behalf of the whole country. Yeah, and so that's kind of where we've stepped in, working with Brian Christie to lobby those foreign governments on the NABC side to say we'll bring everybody together. Now, what does happen is they may have restrictions east of the Rockies that are different than the ones that are on the West Coast. We represent kind of the whole enchilada when it comes to those negotiations, but we also we don't let those issues keep the doors from opening for a West Coast opportunity, whether it's Washington or so just trade negotiations. So it's all over. Other questions about marketing, governmental affairs, fundraising, becoming a member of NABC? Yeah.
Thank you, Casey. On that one slide that you showed on the left side,
Yeah, just keep talking.
said 7% of the people that eat it are males that consume it daily or multiple times a day.
Yeah.
One of the comment that so I think maybe those males can be a potential large target audience, like for health and wellness. Like an example, like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, he said publicly that he eats blueberries with his breakfast every day, right? And he has 350 million followers on Instagram.
Yep.
So like a influencer a campaign, like maybe a posting on Instagram or something might be very good value of expanding that or not like many meals, right?
Yeah, no, Rock has been a great free advocate of consumption. But we do work with influencers that we pay to do very similar things within their audience. And I think to your point, and maybe what you're suggesting is that here's a male icon, they're super user group that has done a good job of elevating blueberries. So yeah, we do have we primarily hired women influencers for that role. So it's a good point. We can't afford the Rock. Yeah. Awkward. Other questions? Come on. Who else has got the ready question? Ready for lunch? Okay. Yeah. Not enough. Yeah, yes. Yeah, which slide are we referring to? This one? Yeah, I don't think it was fresh. Our consumption research was picked on whether you it didn't pair them. It was agnostic to the form. So, but the challenge, I mean, I think the thing that you're pointing out is that it's not enough in food ingredient space. And part of that has always been about supply and price, right? Not enough supply, really expensive. But as that fruit comes on, we're seeing this already start to take place where folks, this has been this for a while, but it's machine harvest process. Price is going to be what it is. As that continues to grow and access for those food manufacturers, becomes less of a risk for them to invest into that market at that time. So there's an interesting future emerging in terms of what that supply, what that increase of supply could represent food ingredients markets. Fine. Other questions? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you all.
Well, thank you so much, Casey, again. Yeah, we're headed to lunch. I think lunch is all ready for everybody. And I just wanted a couple correction from that. If you've seen that table with pesticide credits, at 3:30, you're going to come in here to CHS room for your pesticide credit. So I've corrected what I can. Come in here if you want a pesticide credit at 3:30. And then our next presentation is going to be the Washington Blueberry Commission meeting. And that will in fact be over at our other conference room. So you'll head to the right from the front.